Well, welcome to everybody that's on here. I'm on just a couple minutes early doing some setup work. So I appreciate you for joining. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about, and I will do this again. Oh, I got a couple of minutes before live. Oh no, I take that. It says it's live already. Well, you can tell that I am not the video expert. We run a radio station, radio network, and that's where our expertise lies. So let's get ourselves set up here. Even though we're live, game time doesn't start yet. For you out there, is that do you ever have these technology days like these? And nothing has been working all day. And so, well, the radio station's working, but everything else seems to be not wanting to work. So let's see here. We're starting to get some images here. Let's get rid of that. We don't need it. All right, so what's going to happen here is we hit game time. You're going to hear some background music that'll tell us where. That's where we're at. So we're in a recording stage here. Well, that tells you that IBGR is international because we're now doing our broadcast. We have one in Portuguese, one in Spanish, and one in Mandarin. All right, here we go. Three, two, one. You're listening to IBGR, and you're also watching IBGR on LinkedIn, and you're also watching it on, that's that other platform. Yeah, those Facebook guys. My name is William Eastman. I am happy to be here today. So, how do we lay this whole thing out? Well, today there are no show notes. Today, what I'm doing is I'm doing a review of what we've done so far in the operations track. Today is Tuesdays. Tuesdays is all about operations and how do you build the infrastructure to grow your company. And so what I'm doing is going to work on one of the problems that we have with radio is such a passive medium in that people get trained to sit back and listen. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's the way it works. So one of the advantages of radio is that, or audio, if you listen to podcasting, is that you can work and listen. Working and watching becomes far more difficult because really that should take all your attention up. And it's pretty difficult unless your job, of course, is to watch video. On the other hand, audio gives you a different medium. However, sometimes it's just too passive. So what we're doing today in this series that we're doing for season 12, which is the first quarter of 2023, is we're doing a series of shows on how to win in difficult times. We've done other things on recession proofing your business. This is just a variation on it. And our sole goal, our focus here is pretty simple. And it is, what do you need to do in order to get through either the recession you're in or the recession that's coming your way? And if anybody tells you that it's going to be mild, there's some people who told you last year that inflation was going to be transitory. And of course, we've got a big enough research staff here that we were never, ever, ever under the delusion, okay, this was going to end any other way than the way it's ending. All right, so I'll kind of leave it there for you. So what we did is we built three tracks. We talk about finance on Mondays. Tuesdays, we talk about operations. Wednesdays, we talk about customers, yeah. And the theme for Mondays is owning your numbers. It is so critical for you to own the numbers you have. if you don't you're intimate to what's going on, it's going to be exceedingly difficult for you to get through this, because what a recession is usually, the hallmark of a recession is a reduction in revenue. And then that reduction in revenue also that are in get a couple clients. One are clients who are going to, or clients that are not going to buy at all. And if they're buying, especially if it's new accounts, what you could probably say about the new accounts is that they're looking for the cheapest, the most inexpensive option that they can find. So people are buying less from you. People have stopped buying from you. And then on top of that, what you have is that they're buying maybe your cheaper offers. So what happens to you is a loss of revenue. And so on Mondays, we've talked about this at length, and we've done 3 shows, as a matter of fact, on what you need to do. And I'll do a review of those in a minute. On the other hand, on Tuesdays, our theme has been lowest cost producer. And the idea behind lowest cost producer is pretty simple. And I said cost, not price. Lowest cost producer, the essence of that is, how do you do what you do, starting with the things that the customer pays for, okay? Variable cost, if you want to use that, but whatever it is that you build for customers, or whatever it is that you services you deliver to customers, how do I do it quicker, with fewer steps, for less, and maintain the same level of product or service quality? And that's what we're doing on Tuesdays, and that's where I'm going to take most of the conversation. And by the way, if you are on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is simply, you go to LinkedIn and go to my personal site, and that is William Eastman, okay? Or you can be on Facebook, and you can go to IBGR Network, which is our business page. Either one of those will work, and you can see here some of the things that we've got. And if you got any comments while we're doing this, I'd be happy to handle them, as much as I'm playing one-armed paper hanger here, since I'm the only host here on the network that does not rate as studio engineer. Well, why? Because it's my company. Okay, how's that? All right. And so lowest cost producer is simply, how do I make it better, faster, for less, maintain my quality? Because if I'm losing revenue, then how do I pick it up? How do I get some of that back? By increasing the margins on what I sell. And then on Wednesdays, on the customer one, it's holding your best accounts as our focus, because what we know is that new revenue is going to be increasingly more difficult. And so, as I said before, some are going to buy less, some are not going to buy at all. If you get any new customers, they're probably going to shop your lowest offer. And so all those things combine to say that new business is going to be far more difficult to get than holding old accounts will be to stay with you. And what we've got is, we've got a roadmap on how to do all 3 of those. That's part of this series. All right, so here we go. So I'm going to take the lowest cost producer and do a review of what we did. And so what lowest cost producer is, I basically laid it out when I said to you that this has nothing to do with pricing, it has to do with cost. Now, pricing and where you price your products is a strategic or a brand decision. So I'm leaving that aside. What you do with your pricing is up to you. So, for example, if you could get a better margin on what you're doing, then theoretically what you also could do is that you could use that to lower your prices and still hold your margin. Okay, that's one decision you can make, or you don't. That's totally up to you. And on the customer side, we talk a lot about, on Wednesdays, we talk a lot about the pricing decisions. All right, so what's lowest cost producer, and what does that take? One of the things we talked about a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, as a matter of fact, is that it's nothing more than doing what is called a value map. And a value map is starting with the critical processes, the ones that make the products or deliver the services the customers are paying for, and taking a look and building a map of all those various steps. All right, so here's some terms that you need to be familiar with. There is the as is, which is what is going on right now, the to be, okay, in terms of what you're going to turn it into, and the should be. If you were going to be world class at something, what would that look like? Now, I'm not going to do too much with the should be because if this is the first time you've done it, to be, the new one is going to be good enough. But as is you do a map, and the easiest way of doing it is simply getting out a series of index cards. And if it's just you, then you do it yourself. If you've got other people in your organization who are in these processes, then have them do it. Have them do their pieces of it. And what you want to do is build a picture using index cards, and I put them on a wall. And here is the entire flow or map of what's happening. Now, that will create a couple of interesting dynamics. The first dynamic that's going to create is it's going to be educational if, in fact, people don't understand the entire process. You may think they do, but many times they don't. And so this is instructional going, wow, we go through that many steps to produce that product for a customer, or that many steps to provide that level of service to somebody. That is true. Now what you do is you go through there and say, can we do anything about it? How do we reduce this? And here is a value check. This is why we call it a value map. Here's 3 questions you want to ask yourself on each one of the steps of the process. Question number 1, if you were to itemize the customer's bill, would they pay for it? In other words, a different way of saying is, does this provide value to the customer? Yes or no? If it provides value to the customer, then you keep it. If you get a no, move on to the second question. The second question is that step in there for engineering, quality? In other words, in order to produce it correct, the product correctly or the service correctly, do you have to do that step? If the answer is yes, you keep it. If the answer is no, you move on to the third question. And the third question is, are we doing this for some sort of legal or regulation or government issue? In other words, is this a requirement that's been placed upon us for other reasons? Obviously, you don't want to violate the law or safety standards, things of that nature. If you get a no on all three of those, that step should go. And there's the process that you go through as you look at each one of those saying, should we keep it? Now, once we looked at should we keep it, then we ask ourselves the question of, can we do that better? Is there a more efficient or effective way of doing it? And what happens there is that you have the opportunity, and I'm going to tell you, if you've never done it, I'll absolutely guarantee. Now, this is a free broadcast, so I can't put any money on it. But if I was putting money on it, I would bet you a hefty paycheck that you could find a 10% improvement in your process. 10% improvement. I'd be willing to guarantee it. Now, the beauty of this is you can do it faster and better. If you do it faster and better, you're going to do it at lower cost because you pay for quality either in the process, which we call quality assurance, or you pay on the end, quality control, where you inspect stuff and then you throw away the defects, or even worse, you have the customer inspect it. In other words, you did no quality check, and then all of a sudden the customer's coming back going, I don't really like what you did for us. And then you've got to recover from that, which we talk about on Wednesdays. And so once I've done that and I've collapsed it down, now I start looking for more efficient ways of working it. Now, the other important piece to this, okay, as we come up to the end of the first piece, the most important piece is to understand is that you're not only doing this from an operational standpoint, you're also doing this from a financial standpoint. Because one of the things that we have not talked about on the financial track, which we are doing next Monday, is we're talking about this thing called activity-based costing. You see, in accounting, there are really 2 types of accounting. There is financial accounting and managerial accounting. Now, financial accounting is the stuff that you typically would do. You got QuickBooks, something like that. And that type of accounting is not only gives you good numbers, but it's also required. In other words, if you got a loan from the bank, this is stuff you got to do. You've got to do this in order to produce your taxes. And it's all stuff that's basically, I don't know if it's mandated, but it's pretty close, because in the United States, there's something called the FASB, the Financial Accounting Standards Board. And they basically tell you how stuff should be reported. Well, managerial accounting is totally different, because one of the problems with financial accounting is it does not give you the level of detail that you need to make real time business decisions. So in managerial accounting, what happens is same set of numbers, however, you account differently for what's going on. And what that really means is, let's go back to our analogy. We've done our value map. We've taken out the steps that we don't need to do. We've also come up with some more efficient ways of doing it without sacrificing quality. Then what it gives us the ability to do is burden each step with its actual cost, because there's a challenge. And in all the years that I was doing small business consulting, which is the last third of my consulting career, I would ask business owners the following question: who are your most profitable accounts, or what are your most profitable products and services? And inevitably, they can't answer the question, because if you go to QuickBooks, QuickBooks doesn't give you that answer if that's your accounting system. It'll tell you which ones generate the most revenue, but it's simply not how those numbers are assembled. In managerial accounting, you're looking at each step. So if you did this and you fully burden it with all the material cost, all the labor cost, okay, and overhead, easy to do. And if you follow the series, we'll take you through how to do it over on the financial side on Mondays. You will actually know what it costs to make it. Then you can compare it to the price, and you're going to actually get, instead of getting a gross margin in that we had X number of dollars go out the door, we had X number of dollars come in, what's left over is the margin. We figure that based on revenue, and we say, okay, our gross margin is 30%. I want to go much, much more in detail, and this is absolutely essential. Okay, we got a break coming up, so what I need to do is I need to move on out. So you are listening to IBGR, the world's largest and highest ranked business talk and news network on the internet. And if you're watching on LinkedIn or on Facebook, don't go anywhere. We will be right back. Okay, I'll turn this off for a second. All of you out there, thank you for listening or participating in the first piece here that we're doing. And this is a pretty extensive series uh, behind the scenes. What we're doing is we're doing I believe it is 9 shows for each one of the tracks. And then we're doing 3 of these webinars, which give you an opportunity to come back to us and say, okay, you talked about this. I looked at the show notes. What about it? And it gives us the opportunity now to take you a little bit further. So this is really all our radio shows, certainly the ones that I do, are all designed as do it yourself. And that, how do I give you some help or service on top of it? We designed a webinar series to do exactly that. All right. So when we come back from the break, I'm going to close out the lowest cost producer, and I'm going to do a review of it and give you a little bit more information on it. And then after that, we're going to move on to making sure that you've got the right suppliers, because if we start this chain at the very top, at the very beginning, and what I mean by start the chain is that we're looking at value being provided. The very first part of the process is, who are your suppliers? And that's where we're going to go there. Okay, let's go back to the music, see where we are before we start. Ah, James Bryant. That's what I thought. That should happen. Okay, and we've started. Let's connect. And we're back. You're listening to IBGR, the world's #1 business talk and news network on the internet. IBGR, International Business Growth. We're heard in 183 countries around the world, and there are only 196 So that means we are heard in 92% of the planet. My name is William Eastman. I'm a host for the show, and today's show is a little bit different. We're starting a brand new format and recognize that we've got to do some video rather than just audio. So you're either listening to us on the IBGR network or you're listening to us and watching us. Unfortunately, you're watching me, but you're watching us on LinkedIn, and it's on my personal LinkedIn site. So go to LinkedIn, William Eastman. I'm right there, or at least they should be there. And that if you're on Facebook, and you're a Facebook person, then IBGR Network, go to our business page, and you'll find it there. All right. So there are no show notes for today because what today is about is giving you some help and support and some additional ideas on top of what we covered during each one of the shows. Every show is designed to be a DIY, do it yourself. And these webinars, we're working on this design to see how we want to incorporate it. And if you watched last week, you would say, gee, you look a little brighter today. Well, that's what happened was that we had insufficient lighting in the studio. Why we run a radio station? What do I need lighting for? All right. It's kind of like a cave. Well, we went out and we got professional camera and we got professional lights. So let's see if we can do a little better of this. Okay. So where do we leave off the last segment? This is segment number 2. Where we left that off is kind of just going over the steps of becoming the lowest cost producer. Again, not price, cost. And your idea is how much cost can I take out without sacrificing product or service quality so that I can, in an environment that we're into a recession or a contraction, and I've got less revenue coming in the door, how do I maintain my margins? Now, revenue is a topic we discuss on Wednesdays, and we're going to be doing our webinar next Wednesday at this time at 1 o'clock. And that's what we're going to be talking about, how to hold your best accounts so that you can keep the revenue coming in with better margins. And who knows, at the end of the day, it may be a wash. Lots of companies have gone through this. This is my 5th recession since I've been in business, and I have learned a lot, been hammered. Some of my lessons are from being beat up. All right, so what we did before the break is we talked about value mapping, and we talked about the concept of as is, which is you map what you're doing, and then you look for some improvements. Well, another thing you can do here, and this is what's called the should be. There are 3 states here when you do this: is as is, what you're doing; to be, what you're going to do; and should be, what is the industry leader. Because if you've never done this before, the should be probably is not possible right now, but it is worth taking a look, because as you broke everything down and you said, okay, we got this about as lean as we can get it, what are other people doing? And so the should be process is doing a little market research. Now, I advocated this last week on the video. I'm going to do it this week. I'm going to do it next week on the video. If you have not subscribed to Dun & Bradstreet/Hoovers, please do that, because one of the things you can get for them, whether you buy an individual report or you're a subscriber, and they are not sponsors of ours, so we're not getting any kickback on that. But what you can do is, if you are in a particular industry, let's say you're running a heating and air conditioning, a HVAC organization, how are your numbers comparing to the competition? And you can break that down by number of stores, locations they have. You can break it down by region of the country. But you can look at it, and let's say that you've taken out 10%, which was my guaranteed in the previous episode. You took out 10% of what it was previously cost. Now you're at 90% of that. And then you look at, and you get that final number to produce that service to a customer in the field. Let's say you're servicing heating units you installed. You can look at Dun & Bradstreet's Hoovers, and you can see what the industry average for that. You can go, wow, we're pretty good, or wow, we're not so good. And so what the should be, it may not give you what you're going to do next, but it's going to give you the target. Then you design the to be process. This is how we're going to do it. And then what you do is, at that point, is you start writing some SOPs, or standard operating procedures, in order to do that. All right. And SOPs are absolutely essential. Now, an SOP, or standard operating procedure, view it as an extension of a role description or position description, and also view it as an asset to sell. If you buy a company, let's talk about why companies have a difficult time selling and the owner's happy with the final price. What are they buying? Okay. Well, they may be buying a customer list. Okay. That could be one thing. But customer lists never get valued at 100%. In other words, just because you had those customers doesn't mean that we're going to be able to keep those customers. So maybe you get 50 cents on the dollar. In other words, you got $100,000 from last year in your client list. Now it's only going to be valued at maybe 50,000. The next thing they look at are all the physical assets that you have in a company. So let's say you've got a building worth $1 million, but you got a you got a big loan on it, so you got $20,000 in equity. So it's 50,000 and 20,000 is 70,000. Then you look at the equipment. So let's say it comes up to 100 grand. Well, you've been working for 10 or 15 years. You've invested at least 100 grand of your own money in terms of, if nothing else, using your credit cards and paying them off yourself in the early stages, or going a couple of weeks without collecting a paycheck. And you're going, this business has got to be worth more. It is. Because what else is the customer buying? See, they don't want you hanging around. They want you gone. Maybe hang around a month, but they don't want you there 6 months from now. What they're buying is a fully operational business. Your standard operating procedures are what you consider to be your best practices for every one of these processes, and what's contained in them drives the position description. This has far-reaching impact on the company. If there was only one thing, if you said to me, Bill, I can only do one thing for my business as this recession is hitting me, and I can only do one thing, what would I do? Lowest cost producer. Done. Because lowest cost producers, we talked about in the previous segment, gives me the ability to do activity-based costing, so I can get the true cost of what it costs me to service those accounts or produce those products. Therefore, I have an accurate read of where my price is, and I have an accurate picture of what my margin is, not my gross margin, where all I can do is take liabilities and expenses off of revenue and assets and then come up with a number. I can look at everything that I do, and I can have a margin on it. And I can say, okay, these two lines here are really not working, because one of the things that also happens in a recession is that companies cut back on their lines. They cut back on the products that they're selling or the services they provided. Why do they do that? Well, because if you have the ability to look at it, you could say, look, we do four things. One of them is very profitable, margin-wise. The second one is pretty good, and the last two are not. In other words, we don't make much on those. Maybe you drop one, maybe you drop both for this period of time and focus on what you're doing. Now, I know more things come into consideration. Maybe one of those is a loss leader, where it gets people in the door, et cetera, okay? But the big thing here is, if there was one thing you could do, you could go after you could go after bringing the cost of operation down to where you've got as solid a margin as you possibly can get. All right. Now, that's what we did 2 weeks ago, since we're in the third week of the season. Last week, what we did is we talked about increasing supplier value. Now, why do I go suppliers? Well, because I don't care what you do. Everything is a process, and there's always a beginning. There's always the opening of the funnel for this process. So what can I do if, in fact, I look at my suppliers, the people I buy things from? And coming into bad times, you're going to find them, they're going to be sweating and worrying and grousing over the same things you are. So let's time to pick better, and let's time to improve the relationship, okay? So I'll give you some examples here. Reducing supplier cost from 9 to 4% can double your profits, okay? In other words, if you buy from better people, either because they got lower cost or higher quality, or they got better terms, you could double, theoretically, you could double how much money you're making, okay? You could profit, certainly double margins, okay? 57% of customers believe that, and in this particular case, small business owners believe that the right suppliers give them a competitive advantage. Now, why is that? Well, if you're a smaller company, there are things you don't have the ability to do. So, for example, market research. We talked about Dun and Bradstreet / Hoovers. They were separate entities up until about 6-7 years ago, and they come together. That's one great source. But you know what? If you're dealing with a large company, they got a research department. They got a marketing department. They got a sales department. They know things that you probably could use. And sure, you could find them out by doing research, but why? When they do it. And they would be happy, especially if we look at the totality of the relationship that we have with them. Okay. And that third bullet I have here is what they do is they bring you expertise that may be beyond where you're at the moment. And in many cases, you don't know what you don't know. So what questions do I ask? Well, I don't even know what questions I can ask. Okay. So let's talk about now why they're critical. I kind of gave you some statistics. Let's move over to here. How much easier or how much friction can we remove from the buying process? In other words, when you map your processes out, you one of the processes you have is purchasing. How do you purchase what you get? Okay. Is that as easy as it possibly can be for you? Are there any friction or any hangups in the process that you can get rid of? And you take note of those because there could be, well, I have a different criteria perhaps for shopping a supplier than I did in the past, where it may have been only because they were local or only because they were lower cost. Okay. Um, I want to take a look at how much rework I might have to do. And rework means when I get it from them, whatever it is I get, is it 100% correct? Okay. Because if I'm doing rework, that's a quality issue. How much is that adding to the price? All right. And the last one is, are they open to share their expertise? All right. Because one of the things that we have not talked about yet on the financial side, and I think we're a couple weeks away, but is how to negotiate better terms with your suppliers. Here, I'm only talking about how to look at who you have and perhaps make a decision to move on. And then when we get into the financial side on Mondays, we will discuss how to negotiate with those individuals or with those companies. Okay. So we're coming up on a break here. All right. Here's four things I'll give you to take over. And when we come back, we'll pick up on it. So, how much good faith has occurred between you and them in the negotiation? Okay. Have you really, really sat down and had reasonably intense meetings about all the details, or has it been kind of slam bam? Number three is, are they or are they not replaceable? We have some suppliers in the various businesses that I worked in when I was doing small business turnarounds. And in many cases, 50% of my suppliers, when I was working in manufacturing, there was no alternative. So it was really to work a deal. But on the others, I can move on and go to someplace else and get better. In other words, less friction, more ease of use, less defects, or I can use that as a cudgel to force the suppliers that I have to give me a better deal. Okay. And then the last one here is their willingness to invest in the relationship. In other words, if you came to them and said, look, we're trying to raise, we're trying to raise our game here and we need help. And here's the areas where I know I need your expertise, but we don't have it. Are they open to that conversation? And I can't give you a statistic or a number. I would probably say it's mitzvah, probably 50-50. But that's what you're looking for. And if you don't get it from them, and now is not the time to move, okay, then stick with what you got, especially if it's totally price based. However, you have got a candidate to be replaced when you have that opportunity. Okay, so let me get out of here. You're listening to IBGR, the International Business Growth Radio Network. My name is William Eastman. I'm host for today's show. Today's show is our webinar, the challenge series, we call it. And what we're talking about here is pretty simple. We're talking about how to become the lowest cost producer. And now we've moved into suppliers. When we come back from the break, I'm going to take the suppliers a little bit further and then open it up to other topics. Well, now, I'm sorry. We must have gone long. I had a timer on, but apparently we went a little long. Sorry about that. All right, so I cut off my own commercials. That's my fault. So you're listening to IBGR, the International Business Growth Radio Network, and you're listening to William Eastman, a one-armed paper hanger. In this particular case, I've got so many screens open, and we're trying to figure out how to do this video thing and do it well. And we upgraded our services, and now we have better cameras, we have better lights. We don't have a better face, but not much I can do about that. All right, IBGR, International Business Growth Radio, heard in 183 countries around the world. You're either listening to us on the network or you are viewing me, unfortunately for you, on the IBGR network at Facebook, which is our business page, or on my personal page at William Eastman, and that is on LinkedIn. All right. Now, what you have, if you're on LinkedIn or Facebook, you have the ability to put in comments. So I greatly recommend that you do that if you want me to cover any areas. Now, today is part of our webinar series. Really quickly, what we do is we space this out every week. We take a different topic area and we do a review of where we have been. We've designed all of our courseware, everything that we do on the air as a do-it-yourself. And then we do this as kind of support service. We get to talk about it a little bit more in length and insights that we just can't do on the radio. Also, it gives us out of the passive mode, gives you the opportunity to talk. So where we left this off, first segment, we talked about lowest cost producer. What does that mean? How to do it? We carried that over to this segment. And what we also did is we talked a little bit about suppliers. Okay, so where I lift this off were the 4 characteristics of good suppliers. And I just want to expand on a little bit more before I move on. Okay, so first thing is you're looking for people that have in the past dealt with you the negotiations of a good faith. Let me give you an example of a negative good faith, or a negative faith, I guess I could say, is let's say that you've been with a cell carrier for years, and you saw another carrier who seems to provide the same coverage at a much lower price. Interesting. Well, do you move over? Well, the answer is you probably should move over. All right, so you move over. You move over to the other one, or you announce that to your current carrier that you're going to cancel and move over to the other side. Now, here's an example of bad faith negotiation when they come back and say, well, wait a minute, we'll match it. We'll give you, in fact, we'll even do it for cheaper. Now, on the face of it, not a bad sales technique to see if you can hold an account. Oh, let's really talk about that for a second. Is that why didn't you call me up and tell me about this better deal while I was a carrier? I mean, while I was using you as a carrier, is that the way that you reward your best customers? So think about that for a second. How many suppliers do you have where you find out they did a deal with somebody else and you go, and they go, oh, yeah, we can get you that deal. No, the wrong answer. The right answer is, why didn't you call me if I've been faithful, if I'm paying on time, I've been with you for a while, why didn't you tell me? Okay, that's number one. And I'm going to be looking for those type of people because I want that for my customers. I want customers who are, not customers from hell, customers who are buying from us because they think we provide superior value, but also willing to be truthful. So if we're not doing something right, they just don't leave and go someplace else. They say, hey, you know what? That last order came in, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I use this good faith negotiation with everybody. Now, the second one is, what type of meetings have you had with the suppliers? I'd recommend that you don't do a quickie over the phone. You sit down, and whether you go into their spaces or you bring them into your spaces, doesn't matter, but you go through the details. And the details are not just the pricing and not just pricing at volume. The details are also the issue of how do we pay you? What does a good accounts receivable cycle look like to you? Because that's my accounts payable. Because it could be that I can work out better terms. If I'm into stuff where they're bringing me raw materials, then can we work out a deal about inventory? I'll give you an example again from my last manufacturing job, is that we talked to the suppliers and we couldn't do anything about them. That we had to buy from them. There weren't any alternatives. But what we were able to do is create a process where we would give them an estimate 30 to 45 days prior of what we thought we would need. And we asked them and say, oh, okay, could you just set those aside? Just mark them. Now, if you got to sell them because somebody wants to buy them right now, I'm not asking you not to sell them. All I'm going to do is just ask you, we'll call you once a week about it. You tell us, hey, we had to sell that. Okay? That's number one. And then number two is that we will give you notification of when you want to ship. So can you, instead of coming out once a week or once every 2 weeks with a big load, could you come out twice a week with smaller loads? All right. Because what happens when the load shows up, I get invoiced. So if I'm managing my accounts payable and I'm getting smaller orders in smaller doses, then that gives me the ability to manage my cash flow, because in a lot of small businesses, and especially in a recession, my cash flow is going to be pretty tight. And though I have the money 2 weeks from now to pay for this, I don't have this money today to pay for it. But a smaller order, I can cover that, because then that allows me to produce what I'm going to produce and I can go sell it. Those are the type of things that I want to sit down and have conversations about. And then finally, I want to have the conversation about them in terms of what are going to be some of our needs when it comes to long-term research. And again, I really believe that unless you're dealing with a company that's about your size, more than likely, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you can come to them for help and support. We used this because we had a hard time calibrating some of our machinery. So in our relationship with one of our suppliers, we reworked the deal to where they would come by once a month to calibrate our equipment. It seemed to be beyond the ability of our personnel to do it themselves. So what we did is then we brought that in, and we brought them in to do that. And of course, that really sped up our production times. We got more done in less time, and our quality levels were much higher because we were having real quality issues, because in the next stage there was a lot of stuff getting rejected. We had a lot of stuff in work in progress inventory sitting on the floor waiting for somebody to inspect it, and they made a huge difference. But I cannot emphasize enough that getting the right supplier is part of this lowest cost producer approach. And lowest cost producer is the theme for every show that we're going to be doing on Tuesday through the end of March. Now, the last thing that I'll say, and I'll kind of take some thunder away from our previous shows, or our upcoming shows, I should say, and that is, this gives you built the relationship here. It builds the framework for you to now negotiate better deals. As I was talking about before, better deals could be smaller shipments if you're taking raw materials. It could be storing there. In other words, instead of using inventory in my plant, I could store my inventory in their building and in their trucks. Okay, it delays when I have to pay the invoice. In other words, if I got 30 days to pay the invoice from receipt, I may have just picked up 10 days. Really critical when I'm trying to manage cash flow. But also, it keeps the amount of inventory I got on my shelves, because the way I want you to look at inventory is that's cash collecting dust. And I believe that we are going to be going there in our next show, talking about inventory. All right. And so now what I want to do is I want to start having conversations about how to pay, since I got them here. And so, for example, imagine if their standard is 30 days. Well, what if I could get them to push it out and build us an their accounts receivable, my accounts payable to them, and extend it out by 10 days? You don't think that has a financial impact on the firm? Let's say it cost you $200 a day to keep the building open. I'm just to keep the office open, to keep the place going. All right. All right. So, and I know that's a low number. I just picked it out of my head, but I want to demonstrate how easy the math is on this. So if I get an extra 10 days to pay, that's $2,000. In other words, that's $2,000 that I have saved. And trust me, this formula works. Is that when you start taking the lines of inventory, okay, and then how long it sits on the shelf, and the production cycle, and how long something sits in finished goods, and then I figure out what it costs me to stay open, and what is my cash flow demands, the impact of buying 10 days is enormous on my business. And again, I can run a tighter ship because what I have are fewer. Um, I have fewer demands right now. All right. So when we come back from the break, what are we going to do here? All right. So number one is jump in for some comments, and then what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking some of what we've done on finance, and I'm going to talk a little bit about last week's um, session on the cash conversion cycle. All right. So if you got any questions there, I'm here to answer. And then on the last one, I'm going to be talking about what we did on the customer side, and I will be talking about that. Oh yeah, by the way, yeah, accounts payable is going to be in 3 weeks. All right. All right. So I guess the way to open that cash conversion cycle, which we did last week on our Monday track, is that it takes the basics of an income statement or sources cash flow, excuse me, cash flow statement or sources and uses of cash. And so what it does then is it begins to look at what is that cycle? How does that work? And so, I already have the sources uses of cash or cash flow statement. And that is it tells me what's coming in, it tells me what's going out, and allows me to build a spreadsheet of what's going on. Because one of the things that I tell a lot of people that I've worked with, and it's true to me, the most important answer I could receive when it's related to cash is when. How much is important, yes, but that's secondary to when, because if I'm forecasting cash flow, and let's say somebody can only make a partial payment, that's not really great. But if I got that partial payment and I know date certain and I'm going to receive it, then that gives me the ability to manage my cash flow to say, when do you become cash flow lean? When is it that we're going to be running out of money? Because the one thing that I want to do as much as possible is be able to pay all of my obligations on time. Okay. All right. So I'm going to leave it there. So you listen to IBGR, the International Business Growth Radio Network. My name is William Eastman. This is my webinar series on operations and lowest cost producer. Don't go anywhere when we come back. We'll talk a little bit about cash and some of the other topics we've covered to date. All right. You get to see how the sausage is made. Right. I'll turn urine off there. And so that's it for where we've been on finance, and that's where we've been on lowest cost producer. Since we're only in the third week of the season, this is our second webinar. We did our first webinar last Monday, and what we did is we covered uh, where we were on the basics of financial accounting. And so yesterday, what we did is we talked about the cash conversion cycle, which I'm going to come back to when we come back from break. And then next week, we're going to be doing our show on Wednesday. And let me just look through my show notes. And by the way, all these show notes are available to you. All you got to go to is ibgr.network. And when you get there, go to the resource bar. And when you get to the resource bar, mouse over, you'll get show notes. And when you get show notes, then you'll just go all the way down to the bottom and hit my name, William Eastman. And then what will happen is everything will pop up. Okay. All righty. So I better check where we are time wise. Yeah, see, we go. We're an international station. We're doing a commercial in Mandarin. All right. And then when we come back from that, we'll be talking about customer data, which is really important um, to be able to do the lowest cost producer. You can't do it in a vacuum. Okay, so where are we here? All right, here we go. All right, and we're back. You listen to IBGR, the International Business Growth Radio Network. Today is our challenge webinar. Challenge, because here you got a chance to talk to us. Most of our shows, in fact, just about all of them except mine at the moment, are one way. It's audio, and we talk, you listen. Okay, that's kind of how it works. Well, what I wanted to do is I wanted to take that to another level. So, what we have interspersed every week on a different day, we have the webinar. Last week it was on Monday, and we took everything that we did in the Monday track on finance. Today is Tuesday, and we're taking everything, the two shows that we've done so far on becoming the lowest cost producer. And by the way, the Monday track is owning your numbers. And then next week at Wednesday, we're going to be doing everything related to customers. And the theme of that is holding your best accounts, because in a recession, in an economic contraction, that may be the only place to go. All right. So now that we've covered our first two modules, what I want to do now is kind of talk about yesterday's show. Gives me a chance to go through it. Now, the cash conversion cycle is really critical, because if you're going to manage cash flow, which is just something you absolutely got to do, then what you have to get on top of is two things: how much comes in and when it comes in. And as I said before the break, to me, when it comes in is more important than how much. Yeah, I'd like to get all of it from whoever owes me money, but sometimes that's not possible. And so if I know how much I'm getting and on what date, even if it's not the max amount, that's the second best condition in my mind, because at least I know, okay, on this date, I have this much money. And as the recession picks up and revenue shrinks, and I'm working at managing my margin, which is really what we do on Tuesdays when we talk about the lowest cost producer, how to increase better margins on what we do, I also have to take into account that I have to figure out cash wise when we're in trouble. Now, before I get into this, one of the things that I say all the time to people, and we started taking our own medicine here recently, is you got to get a line of credit. And what a line of credit is, it's not for you to buy anything. A line of credit is what gives you some sense of security that if we get jammed up, I got to dip into. So, line of credit's used to maybe to make payroll, pay taxes, pay off bills that are due, and you don't have the cash flow at the moment to pay it. Those are the things that are critical. And as soon as the money's in, you take your credit limit down, your line of credit, excuse me, you take it back down, maybe not to zero, but you take it down, because that's what it is. It's a reserve. It's cash that the bank or the lender is holding for you. All righty. So let's get into this whole thing about the cash flow conversion cycle. Number one is we have forecasted versus performance to plan. And so when you take a look at, you need to know two things. One, you have to have the historical perspective of how the company spends money, because you know when things are due. You got a track record on that. All right. You also have when you're supposed to be paid. So that is actually the forecast. Okay. And we got to pay this bill, and then we get it on this date. All right. And then what you have is tracking what is actually going on. Now, this is all a spreadsheet. And in fact, in this show, I had in the show notes. So if you want to get to this one, you get to, you go to IBGR.network, go to resources. When you go to resources, mouse over, click show notes. And what you're looking for is show 12, episodes 61 through 64. And if you pop that up, you have the same notes that I'm looking at. So what I have here, and if you're on LinkedIn or Facebook, you can go there. And by the way, if you're in the listening audience and you want to watch this, I don't know why you want to look at me, but if you want to watch this, Facebook is IBGR Network, our business page, and on LinkedIn, it's on my personal page, okay? So what we have here is we have what you forecasted and what you track, and it's all a matter of building a spreadsheet, because the issue is always going to be when you recognize the revenue. Money coming in, I'll say it again, how much is secondary to when? Because if I get a solid number, somebody pays me 50 cents, 50% of what they owe me, but I got it on Monday, then I can look at what impact that has this week and what else do I need to do, okay? So, production forecast. All right, now, and when I say production, I don't want you to think producing things exclusively. It's also around services, and that is, I look at the total schedule that we have. Okay, for the month, since most of us are operating on a 30-day cycle, I look at the total schedule that we've got, work that we've got planned. All right, and then I look at the sequence within the schedule. That's the second thing that I look at, because what do I want to know? When, either when can I bill, or when can I bill again? Now, everybody's got a different business, so some of you take money up front. That's always awesome because it really helps cash flow. But I'm going to put that aside. The question here is, I've got an assignment that's in a workflow. When is it that I, based on the contractual arrangement I have with the customer, when can I bill for the thing? And so that I want to put into my spreadsheet. And so what I want to be looking at is that comparison between the two, because if, let's say, I have a construction type contract where, with construction contracts, and it's also mostly in project management as well, is usually you've got an upfront deposit to gear everything up, buy equipment, get people in place, and then you have something that's percentage of completion. Right? So if I have percentage of completion, and let's say the terms are at 25, 50, 75, and at 100%, and we're at 33% right now, that means I got paid for one, but when am I going to get paid for the 50%? Then I have to factor in their accounts receivable cycle. In other words, with us, how long does it take them to pay us? Do they pay immediately? Do they take 10 or 20 days, or do they they take it to the limit? And what the limit is, typically it's a 30-day thing. So where are we here? Because I bill it on this date, but I can't recognize it until this date here. I need to know that. So let's go out 30 days out from today, 30 days out from today. Today's what, the 18th of January. So let's say that would be the 17th of February. I don't have that money until then. And this is even more critical in the sales process. Why sales forecasting, the accuracy of sales forecasting, is so critical to you as the business owner, because that's the money coming in the door. And so, this is probably one of the sorriest stories I've ever heard, but it's true. And that is, you're broke as a business, and you've got a 60-day sales cycle, and you got nobody in the funnel. Guess what? You're not getting any money for 60 days. So by having this forecast where you've done it for the year and you're breaking it out by the month, and you've got one that is the standard, what you believe you've done. In other words, you close the deal, here's the contract, you put it in the plan, and then in the actual spreadsheet, what are you doing here? You're actually tracking it, and you can say, we've got 5 weeks of hell coming. We have 5 weeks of no cash flow. What are we going to do about that? And so I have to take that into account, not when we have 5 weeks where we don't have any revenue. I got to take accounting of that in sales. And that's why having a great sales manager and somebody who understands how to forecast, and I won't go into sales forecasting here. In fact, we're not going to cover it, but that's really important, because this allows me to build this whole schematic. And as I said, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have a line of credit that you can access and utilize when it is that you need it, because if you can't, then what's going to happen to you is basically you're going to run out of money. And then what do? Then you start defaulting. And even if you catch up, let me tell you how commercial credit works, because credit is always important, even if you make a decision that we are not going to borrow money. Our company, IBGR, has no debt. That's on purpose. Now, we have a line of credit, we haven't tapped, but we have no debt. That's a decision that we made as a business. But it's really a difficult thing in the early stages, especially in the recession, to stay on top of this, because your sales forecast may not be accurate at all. Okay, and so what am I doing in my actual? And as I compare to the plan or the forecast, is I'm looking at revenue inflows, I'm looking at cost of goods sold, I'm looking at the velocity of how money is coming in versus going out, because in an expansion, when the economy is growing, more than likely the money is coming in faster than it's going out. Doesn't mean you're more profitable or you even have more revenue. It just means that you're typically getting paid faster. In a contraction, guess what? you're going to get slow paid. And that really hurts you because then you slow pay. And if you're into commercial credit, let me tell you how commercial credit works. It's different than personal credit. You start with 100 points, and every time you fail to meet, it takes points off of your 100 score. And in fact, paying on time does not improve your credit score. Paying ahead of time. So if you worked out a deal with somebody, let's say you got the standard accounts payable, and you pay in 30 days, you want to pay on day 29. So paying on day 30 actually hurts you. You want to pay a couple days early. If you got it in 40 days, then you want to pay on day 38. That type of stuff. Okay. All right. So where we are now is I'm going to talk a little bit about tomorrow's presentation over in sales. And again, if you got any, I mean, over in customers, if you've got any questions you want to ask, please post it. And you can post that either in LinkedIn, and in LinkedIn, we're on my personal page, or you can do that on Facebook, and that is on the company page. And I'm here to answer your comments. But other than that, you are listening to the number one, let me say it again, you're listening to the number one business talk and news station. We not only have talk, which is host, all of them are entrepreneurs and business owners who, number one, understand the world you're in because they're in it. Number one. And number two is they're subject matter experts. The topic they're talking about is their area of expertise. And so, what you get 24 hours a day, 7 days a week is that type of expertise. Monday's finance, Tuesday's operations, Wednesday's customers, Thursday people. And on Friday, we talk to the business owner as if they're executive. That's how we got to be, by web ranking, the number one business talk and news network on the internet. My name is William Eastman. I'm founder, co-founder, really, and managing partner over here at IBGR. And when I come back, I'm going to talk a little bit about what you can expect in tomorrow's show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. All right, so everybody listening, or everybody's going to watch this on video later, don't go anywhere. Timing My timing is getting good. I have to run a stopwatch on this particular show simply because of the way it's working. All right, so hopefully what you're seeing is the entire interconnectedness of this. The most difficult thing was doing them in tracks. Just doing finance by itself and going step by step, there's so many references over to things that we're doing in operations or we're doing over in customers. Because if we look at the finance piece, everything related to cost happens on Tuesday in operations. Everything that happens in revenue is in our third track on Wednesdays on customers. So what we're really doing is once you own your numbers, you're really intimate to what's going on in your company. Then what happens is that we help you take the costs down so you become more profitable. And then what we do is we help you um, hold your best accounts. And we've got some interesting strategies. Some of these you've heard before, some of them you haven't. I'm willing to guarantee that. Okay. All right. Boom, 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 boom. What am I doing here? Did I lose myself again? Okay. You caught me going around, and I'm looking for my next set of notes. Da, da, da. Too many pages. I should have tagged these together. And by the way, if you've got any search, anything that you're looking for, the IBGR network is just full of stuff. I mean, you cannot believe how much stuff we got on our site. All right, so I guess I didn't print it. Let's see where we are time-wise. Here we are. So if you needed any proof that we're an international company, we're now advertising in four language: English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Mandarin. Let me look at my clock. Okay, there we are. All right, so everybody there, we've now gone off our airtime. And so where we are now is I'm going to talk a little bit about next week. So I'm going to hold you over for a little bit if you like. All right. So what we did is 2 weeks ago, we talked about database relationships and that really that without an accurate database, you cannot manage the customer's relationship. And by the way, you can find this by going to IBGR.network. And when you go to IBGR.network, go to resources, mouse over, find show notes. And what you're looking for is S12, season 12, episodes 9 through 12 will get you started. And so the idea behind this is that you need to have a process of collecting both quantitative, numbers, and qualitative feelings, emotions, okay, from the customer. And then once you do that, you have a good sense. So when you're going back and you're looking at the lowest cost producer, you've got a really good sense of where you make improvements. Now, if you're trying to improve a process, should you involve the customer? That really depends upon whether or not you're willing to open the kimono and show customers what you're doing. If in fact you're not there yet, then just solicit them. But at some point, it's not bad to have customers in that. So that's what we talked about. And then um, last week, what we did is we talked about the promise gap. In other words, the key issue in all of customer service, and by the way, I didn't say it before, let me say it right now, is that customer service is not a random act of kindness, it's upselling. So what you're really looking to do is you're really looking to upsell your accounts. All right. And so how do you do that? If you give them bad service, you're not going to sell anything else to them. You're not going to be able to hold them. And so great service not only holds the accounts you have, gives you the ability to upsell those accounts. All right. And so what we did is we talked about the promise gap because if you don't deliver on promise, you're dead. So that's the one to get right. Now, what happens when you don't do that? And that's what we covered. Um, and that's what we're going to cover. I should say what we're going to cover tomorrow is that what we're going to be doing tomorrow is we're going to be talking about the recovery gap and what happens when you don't produce what you promise you're going to produce, whether it's a product or service, on time or with specifications or features or things that the customer expected. What happens when that does not occur? And now the way you can save your bacon is recovery. As a matter of fact, and I'm not going to give this example that I'm going to use tomorrow, but in reality, if let's say your delivery on promise runs at about 95%, and that only 5% of the time you have any defect to recover from, you actually can build a better service reputation than if you were 100% all the time. That seems kind of stupid, seems like crazy, because being perfect is impossible and working toward it is difficult. And yet, somebody who has a great recovery policy and doesn't screw up much actually has a better service reputation. Why? What do people believe? A statement on your website or their own eyes? All right. So with that, I greatly appreciate you listening and hanging over here. This is going to be available on LinkedIn and on Facebook. It's also going to be available on YouTube as we build our YouTube channel. Take care. Thanks for listening.